Okay, I think we're live. I'm having so much trouble trying to get my YouTube channel ready to go. It says we're live. Um, uh, Hope you'll bear with me. Ah, there we go. I wanted to make sure I saw my screen. And I want to make sure you're able to chat with me. Enable chat live is ready. And I'm going to talk about my community art project where we're going to create some artwork together, and I want to be able to share my process with you, so while you're doing your social distancing you can try a new technique, see if it's something you want to continue to do. If not, no big deal. The main thing is we're going to try to have some fun, and then I got to make sure I see my as I said, please bear with me. I'll probably do this several times before I get it right, but we're going to try to get through this first one. I'm going to go through these steps real fast. I'm not going to make this a super long video, hopefully. Then we'll talk about the project, which is going to include participants from all over getting a kit in the mail. And this, to participate, you can pay what you can. If you can pay $10, great. If you're stuck at home and you're not generating income and you can't afford to pay anything, that's fine too. Just sign up. Let me mail you the kit, which will include 2 panels. The wax is already on them. And I will put in there the 2 template pieces of paper. Those will be to draw your composition on. I'll put in some clippings from a magazine, different colors that I choose. Nothing in particular, but it'll have some textures, random colors. I'll throw in a piece of sandpaper, and the rest of the tools and things that you'll need, you'll be able to find around the house at home. And I'm going to start out by first letting you know the beeswax has been smooth. I use a scraper tool, and I'll demonstrate a little bit of everything as we go. But yeah, a scraper tool that somebody would use in ceramics, working with clay. And I scrape the beeswax smooth. And then we have our template. I'm going to use this one. And we're just going to do some random drawings. Now, when we're doing these drawings, I'm going to show you some examples of things I've done. These little tiles, just some abstract drawings. I want this is going to be your first time doing this more than likely. So I want it to be fun and no pressure. I want you to have fun with it. So we're not going to get too technical on these drawings. And by that I mean we don't want to have a bunch of real tiny areas. I'd rather you have something, in the larger size of shapes for the first time. And if you don't have a craft knife, something that you're comfortable using like this, you're probably going to be using a pair of these, which is fine, but it's going to be hard to cut some of the smaller things in the proper way. So let's do a quick drawing. I'm going to do a really simple one, so any beginners or someone with young children, you definitely don't want to cut a bunch of tiny pieces. And I'll show you how you can make it look like there's tiny pieces involved. So maybe you don't cut something like these little triangles, But in the end, we'll be able to make it look like you've done some detail work like this. Really simple. So on the first one, some of these papers will have little squares on them. I'm just going to use something to do a little abstract drawing on. Just going to use the shape of this thing and create a nice little composition. I'm going to do this. Yeah, maybe I'll do 2 of those. Almost like a tic-tac-toe. Uh-oh. You don't have to use something to trace. If you want to just do a random, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to make this, yeah, let's stay about that. You want to just do a quick drawing like this, that'll work too. So whatever floats your boat. And then depending on what tool you're using. So if you're using an X-Acto knife, you would put it back in place, and then we would basically cut those shapes like that. Not cutting too hard, we just want to cut enough, cut through the paper. And the reason I like to do it this way, so let's say this corner's done, I can pull this piece off, and I'm going to go to my paper that I want to transfer, and I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to flip it over backwards or upside down, because I want this image to be face down. And then I'm going to cut that same shape with my knife using this piece as a template. And if you're not familiar or comfortable with using a craft knife like this, this might be a little troublesome. So you can see now I have the template, and then I have the piece I cut just like it. So the template would go face down like that. So in its place now is going to be this. This will hang over a little bit. If you have an X-Acto knife, you can kind of burnish in like this. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you can definitely use a spoon and kind of burnish it in just to hold it in place. And so that's why I like working with a craft knife or X-Acto knife, is I can pull off a piece and replace it with the image, and all these are still in place. If you don't have that, say you're working, let me cut this down a little bit. If you're working with scissors, alright, so what you're going to end up doing is something a little different. But you're going to cut, I would only cut one piece at a time, just to save you, and that way you can sit this back down. Okay, so that came from there. So I'm going to take this piece off. Let's go a little lighter here. And so now I'm going to kind of do the same concept, but I want to make sure, okay, this came from here, so I want it to be upside down, facing what I want to transfer. And we're going to cut that same shape. Scissors. I'd hate to do one of my larger paintings like this. Scissors are a little bit slower, but if that's all you got, it'll still work. So we'll put it in place. And like I said, if you're not using the X-Acto, that's what I use to put it butt in. You can use a spoon. And we're just going to kind of rub over the top of it just to hold it in place so it doesn't move on us. So then we'll go to the next piece. Same thing, one piece at a time. And it may be nice to, well, that doesn't work, have something written on the side that goes up, so you know to put that down when you're cutting your magazine paper in that shape. So I'm going to cut that one. We'll set that back in place. Now I need to cut this in a color. Let's see. Let's find something that would be cool here. And I gotta make sure I got something large enough. We're gonna go this blue because I know it's big enough. So notice this, the side that's up from the template goes face down on top of the color I'm transferring. I like to use one edge. If I know one edge is straight, put that up against there. That way you can hold it. And we're going to cut that shape. That shape goes there. This is going in its place. Oops. And I try to get these lines as close together as possible. Those lines, you know, where these two pieces come together, the less beeswax you have showing, the less headaches you'll have later. I know we're not going to be perfect. Sometimes you'll have a gap like that. It's not a big deal. It's just, it's better if you don't have it. And since we're picking this one up, I can adjust the next one. So I'm going to go ahead and do this piece across the top. Notice I'm setting this back down in its place just to make it easier for getting the next one in place. Alright. And if anybody's commenting, I'm sorry, I'm noticing that saying my video output's slowed for some reason. Internet's a little bit lagging. I'm sure because everybody's staying at home and they're doing stuff online. Hopefully we won't have that trouble when we do the live stream with the kits when they come out. So now you see kind of the steps involved. The scissors, of course, may be what many of you have to do unless you're the artsy type and you just happen to have craft tools and stuff in place. If not, like I said, scissors work. We're proving it right here. Alright, so we burnished those three pieces in place. Alright, we got two more pieces to do. We're going to do this one, and another thing is keeping up with what colors you put where. Alright, scribbles go face down on the color I want, so I'm going to go with this gray. You'd be surprised, gray works really well up against these other bright colors. It's good to have a variety of vibrant color with either black or gray. Sometimes brown's good too. Alright, put this one in its place. So we got a little bit of another good thing about having the X-Acto or the craft knife is you can move the paper around on that wax a little easier because it doesn't slide. And if maybe you don't have a craft knife, you could get something like a pen or something. Maybe a straight pen, put it in a cork like this. That's a good tool to have. You can pick these things up off of the beeswax a little easier. But the beeswax is pretty tacky and that paper doesn't slide. And another option is just a pocket knife, as long as it's got a point on it. You can kind of get that point and move things where they need to be in place, or peel up the paper. Alright, one more. I'm going to go back to this guy. I kind of like this. So notice scribbles face down on what I want to transfer. And then any other videos I do, I'm going to really push certain points of this process, because believe me, I've been there. I know where mistakes will be mostly made. Alright. And if your piece overhangs a little bit, it's best to cut that off. And I'll tell you why when we get to the more closer to the end. Alright, yeah. So now, all the pieces have been cut in place on this one. I'm going to go back and forth with my spoon, or here's what I use. It's a wooden block. Man, I can push down with this thing. It's the best. Until I've been using it. I started with a smaller one. I kind of like this one. It's a little better to hold. So if this is something you want to continue to do, you might get you a chunk of 2x4. Just sand the edges real good so it doesn't dig into your paper. Put a little pressure. That one's ready to go to the next step. But before I do that, I'm going to finish this one. And then I'm going to show you another option on the transfer. So, alright, option 1, we did scissors instead of the craft knife. We'll use a spoon to burnish, which we may all have to do that, because I don't know, unless you got some pieces of wood lying around or something similar, you could actually use something like this Altos case. I mean, it's got a rounded edge on it. You won't dig too hard into the beeswax, so that's a good option. All right. Scissors, we've done that. I'm gonna stick with the craft knife on this one, and then I'm gonna show you one where the cut would still be scissors, but maybe it's you want to transfer something and you have somebody that's not going to be able to cut these smaller pieces. I mean, these could be hard for some people. So let me go ahead and show you real quick this is how I normally do it. Craft knife, and I lay it down on top of the piece. The marked up area, which is upside down. It's habit for me, so I don't have to pay attention as much, but I remember early on I really needed something on there to show me, okay, that goes face down. So we did that blue. And another neat trick is when you're working with these magazines, advertisers especially, or the people that edit magazines, the layout, you'll get a lot of great color palettes on one page. So if you choose, you could have a magazine at home that's got a nice color palette you like. You could just use it instead of the pieces I send you. Now I will recommend, face down, that you try and use magazines that I recommend. There are some magazines aren't so good for a transfer, so you may be wasting your time. It'd be frustrating to do a transfer and it not work. Alright, let's see here. We'll do some red now. And I'll put somewhere, I may put it in the kits, the magazines that I use. Actually, I'll probably post it somewhere, my website or whatever, when we send out the kits and you get them. So face down. And if you do have magazines that would work, look for things with cool patterns or textures. That's why I like Veranda magazine so much. It has a lot of fabric, carpet, curtains, woodworking, details, and from all these different things are really nice to use for a transfer. And okay, one more piece, then we'll get on to the next step. I'm running out of things here. I'll have to grab another piece of paper. Let's get something else here. Another thing that I will mention when we do the online class, things with white in them they're not going to transfer anything because there's no ink there where white is showing up. So it could be a cool effect if I wanted to, for instance, get that grid in this window. I could do that and it would just show those coming, the bars in the window coming across. But instead, I like the patterns in these rugs. Those curtains are cool too. And you can place text, or say you want some puppy dogs, you could put those into the composition. But I wouldn't overthink things like that. If you have one of these squares come off, or actually I'm going to show you. So we got two of these blocks done. And you can do both of them at the same time from your kit. You can do the same exact pattern on each one if you wanted, or you could do like I did, do two totally separate compositions with different colors. That is totally fine. Now if you want to transfer something and you don't want to do a lot of little pieces, we have the option to take and just transfer a section out of the magazine, or maybe two pieces. So say you like the dogs, we're going to just cut that out in that same shape. And if you're working with a youngster or somebody that's has trouble with a knife like this, you can cut that square out with scissors. Be totally fine. Now this works, but I don't necessarily recommend it. I'd rather you cut this up into 4 pieces. And for some reason, this is why the transfer on large areas like this usually isn't as good as the transfer on smaller areas. So if you do transfer something large like this, if possible, if you have a way to do it, either an X-Acto knife or a utility knife, that's fine too. Once you've cut it, come in and just kind of score into the magazine paper after you've burnished it. So those, now instead of one big piece, you've got these 4 smaller ones. I think it's all about, there could be some air pockets in there that's hard to get out. So when you cut it like that, it makes it easier to get those out. Burnish it one more time. Okay. Get this out of the way. So now we actually have 3. So I showed you the different tools for cutting the paper. Scissors, knife. You can use utility knife. Burnish it with a spoon or a wood block or an Altus. Either way. You want to rub it in or burnish it really well to where you have no air pockets. Once you do, you get to the part where we're going to sand it. And I will include a piece of 150 grit sandpaper in your kit. And that will be used to, I just want you to lightly sand it. And if you have any areas where the groove is open right there, that's why I want you to try to have those close together. Because when you're sanding, if you get a hold of some beeswax, it'll gum up your sandpaper and you won't be able to, you won't be as abrasive. It'll clog up those pieces of sand. So what we're doing is we're roughing up that glossy paper so that the magazine page will absorb water. When it absorbs water, it kind of turns to a pulp. You see, I'm not digging in too hard. I'm just, usually what I look for is that color is going to go away and the gloss is gone. And if I see any areas where there's still a little gloss, I'll hit it again with the sandpaper. I'm going to go ahead and do all three of these. Alright, move all my junk out of the way. And then you're going to need some water and a cotton rag. I keep a big water bottle in the studio full, and then just scrap t-shirt. So after I've sanded it, I like to spray the cloth and then just wipe the dust up so I don't get it all over the place. And then now we got our sanded blocks. We're going to spray each of these with water. I'm just going to take our fingers and rub the water around and make sure all the areas of the paper are soaked. Once they are, this is where I want you to, you start rubbing your hand across it, you'll feel the paper kind of getting pulpy. It feels a little, when you see it start peeling like that, that means you're ready. And I want you to, you'll push really hard with your finger and rub the paper off. If you go too easy, what'll happen is the paper kind of rolls on you, and the ink will stay on the paper and it'll end up not sticking to the wax. And don't worry when you do this if you see an area where you've kind of scratched into the surface. That's just part of the process. Sometimes you'll get a perfect transfer, and then other times you'll have either pits where there's going to be voids, or you'll scratch it as you're rubbing it. And that's kind of why I don't rub the paper off with a rag, because it's more likely to scratch. So after I've done it, get the paper off, I'll wet my t-shirt real good and have some water on top of this, and then I kind of buff it. At this point, I'm not rubbing really hard. I'm just barely putting any pressure, and I'm getting that haze off of it from the paper. Okay, let's do this again. Paper's wet and it's starting to ball up. I'm going to push pretty hard. I'm going to rub off the paper. Well, that one's dark. And then I'm going to wet it again. If you don't have a sprayer, you could just have a bowl of water and just maybe put it on a rag and squeeze it on top of it, or just splash it with your fingers. That'll work just fine. So there's two of them buffed out. And this one, yeah. This is the one we didn't cut, but just one shape. So you can see that that'll work. When I started doing this process, that's what I was doing, is just transferring images from magazines onto some barnwood with beeswax on it. It kind of grew from that to the mosaic transfer I do now. You can see the old puppy dog came out pretty good. So there's our 3 compositions. This one, of course, being the easiest to do. Just transferring one image in a 3-inch square on top of the beeswax. And then these 2, a little more technical, one with scissors and one with the craft knife. And now, this is where I would usually hit it with a heat gun. But since you're not, more than likely you don't have one, I'm going to go on to the next step, and then when I get the piece from you that's going to be in the installation later, I'll hit it with a heat gun and then put a sealer on it here at home. So, but next we want to scribe in, do some drawings. Like on these, you can see what I've done is I've got these lighter areas. That's where I've taken away the transfer. I've carved into the wax. I have, well, I'm just going to show you all these tools. I have this arsenal of tools, little pointy things that somebody would use for sculpting in clay. Scrapers. Yeah, I got an option of things. Little flat things if I want to carve out things. Grooves. I think that's what I used here, is I just used that wide thing. Like, I guess you could use a screwdriver and do something similar if you got small screwdrivers. It's an option. Screw. If you don't have any tools, you got a walnut pick. That works really well. And I like to kind of outline the shapes that I cut. You don't have to do this. You can follow those cut lines, or you could kind of do your own thing. And I'll tell you, the great thing about having these different patterns from the magazines, you can use those to bring out highlights and place details. I'm gonna, since this wood pattern, those boards, is kind of cool, I'm gonna just follow that and scrape away the light areas and leave the dark. This is where if you got some kids at home that are doing this, you can let them kind of, they could write their name. Let's see, what could we do here? I got it. Because when you transfer text, so if you had a magazine that had some text on it, you got to remember the text is going to be backwards, so it's not going to read properly. But what you can do, if you do something like this, you can write dog. And of course you have to, it kind of adds a little something to it. And I wouldn't go crazy. I think it's better to have, I used to scrape off a lot of the wax in the negative areas, but it's kind of cool to leave more on there now. I think it looks better. Yeah, look at there. Let's see, I've done patterns in areas that were too boring for me, like that blue's pretty boring. Instead of leaving it like that, I may, let's find something here. I wonder how a screw would, just to leave a mark. So now that I got those circles, I'm going to take the screw and there's a bunch of different things you could do there. You want to go Bob Ross and put a happy tree there, you go for it. I think adding some kind of repeated pattern is cool. Playing with bright colors, maybe colors that don't necessarily go well together. That's cool. Playing with one image with some text on it. Whatever floats your boat. Alright, so it's looking kind of neat, but I think we need something here too. Toothpicks, those could be things to scribe with. Those fingernail cuticle cleaners or whatever, those would work. You can use your imagination. I'm sure there's something around the house that you could use to create more details. And you'll notice the difference in the sheen. These have a finish on them. Once you finish the one you're keeping at home, you can go to a craft store, Hobby Lobby or something like that, and use like a gel medium, a varnish to put over the top of it. Mod Podge will work. Anything to kind of coat the top of this. On my larger paintings, I usually use a spray varnish called Kamar. It's made by Krylon. On smaller pieces like this, I actually use a product called Wax Sealer. And I order it online. It's an encaustic wax used on, or a lot of encaustic artists that do the iron encaustics. This is what they use to seal it when they put it on like gift cards or greeting cards or small paintings. So this works fine. But it's technically like an acrylic medium. So your choice. If you don't put anything on it, the only thing that will happen is it will bloom, which means it'll get a haze on it, and it will collect dust. So you'd have to occasionally wipe it with a wet cloth to keep it from hazing and clean the dust off. So there is, yeah, kind of a quick explanation on different ways we can create these little pieces, and we'll think of more, I'm sure. And now that I've done one video, I'm gonna try to do another few of them before people get their kits in the mail. Like I said before, I'm hoping to get several kits out tomorrow or Saturday, and then maybe by Wednesday we can do another live stream where you can follow along, and I'll go slow enough where people can watch me do it. We'll do it step by step, and hopefully we'll have a way to do comments then too. I apologize if you've posted comments, I'm not seeing them, but I also know that it's saying my live stream has got low output, so hopefully it's not been miserable to watch. So we're right at 40 minutes. I'm gonna cut this one off, and the next one I may do one live with my phone on Facebook or Instagram. That might be a better way. Maybe I just do them all, that way we know that we've got different sources that may work better, because I'm not sure about the thing I like about the YouTube one is the camera's much better, but it uses a lot more video output, I guess. Alright, I'm gonna stop right there. Thanks for watching, and yeah, send me some messages, comments. Please share this. I want to do 100 of these kits. Pay what you can. If you can afford to pay $10, so be it. If not, I'll still mail you a kit. I'll just need your address. And I want you to mail one back to me to go into my installation, and you'll keep one for yourself. You choose which one. So that's it for now. Thanks. We'll see you next time.